We've just had David Chandler's presentation, and I would like to invite Xander to come up and raise 1 to 2 issues within the space of 5 minutes, and then we'll hand over to David. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, David, for your presentation. So to start, the implications of a Northwood-style event are daunting. It is dark, and I think that's what we need to keep in mind. So a Northwood-style event would, in fact, be a dark situation. That is exactly what was implied by the Northwoods documents. A key issue that I have with your interpretation of things, David, is that you are relying heavily on FDR data or information and some radar data, which is actually not consistent with the 84 Radies data that I've reviewed. And in both of these instances, that data is digital ghosts from the past. This data has been given to us in the form of various spreadsheets and other things, but when compared to physical evidence that we can actually evaluate currently right now today, such as the resistance of limestone and concrete and what have you, and the energy delivered from a hypothetical kinetic impactor, those are all evaluations which we can do currently right now today. We have to put a lot of faith in the other digital data that we're interpreting, and frankly, I don't think that putting that much credence in the interpretation from some random Australian Warren Stutt, Mr. Stutt, if you're available, please come to the party, let's talk about it. I don't think we should put that much weight on his interpretation of these data frames. Pilots for 9/11 Truth, they were not able to use the FDR data in American Airlines software. So how is FDR data layout from alleged American Airlines aircraft not compatible with American Airlines software? All of that can be reviewed in the restored Pilots for 9/11 Truth website. With respect to the witnesses, another issue that I take is this. It was perhaps just a grave mistake to imply that CIT ever said that the aircraft would have been on a north path and then done some very impossible roll maneuver to then impact light poles. In fact, it is crystal clear that they never said that. And when the audience reviews the entirety of the CIT hypothesis and evidence set, they see that that is exactly not what they said. They said that the plane would have had to, in fact, traveled on a north path the entire time. So that statement was never made, and it's curious to me that it was injected into the discussion here today. Witnesses that describe an impact with these really precise details, such as first it hit a generator and then the wing dipped and this and that and the other thing. Remember, we're told 530 miles an hour. Have you ever had a motorcycle whip by you at 100 miles an hour? Imagine 5 times that. Could you really discern all of these crisp features, such as then it dipped low and then it went this way and it rolled and it hit this and that? I don't think so. And those witness statements are coming telephonically pretty much right away and then spread through the news. Yet the CIT witnesses are all human beings in the flesh, interviewed in person, on site. Sergeant Lagasse worked at the Pentagon. He worked at that Citgo gas station. He is not confused about where he was every day of his life on the job and which direction he was facing. And Sergeant Lagasse would not have been confused about the vector of an impacting or approaching aircraft, when he turned his head and saw it this way. He's very clear about that. Sergeant Lagasse also did discuss explosions and knowing the difference between a detonation and deflagration. And I would like to share with the audience that it is possible to have ordnance that delivers deflagration. That is something that can be created. You can tune an ordnance device to do just that. You need to disperse something, say for instance like jet fuel, in an aerosolized fashion across a large volume so that you have a stoichiometric reaction, and you can reach deflag to detonation transition when you use devices like that. You can make big, slow fireballs with ordnance. That's been available since World War II. So it's not as if it's even secret sauce. I don't know why we're pretending that technology doesn't exist. And with 30 seconds, I'd just like to say that the remnant column 18 is impossible. It doesn't matter how large or fat or heavy the slab behind it was. If an airline impacted it at 530 miles an hour, that column would have been absolutely eviscerated. Yet it was left standing in Corporal Ingersoll shots, and that is all the proof we need.
Okay. I took a few notes here. I don't know if I got all the points down. The FDR and the radar basically was it was gathered by a number of people, somebody named Farmer, I think it was John Farmer, was right? Okay. He assembled a lot of this data and was able to basically map out the entire path from Dulles all the way to the Pentagon in radar. You can see the diagrams that I showed coming right into the Pentagon. The radar got as far as the Sheraton Hotel, but no farther because by then the plane was too low. It was literally flying under the radar, as they say. Okay. The FDR, apart from the little offset, which is maybe 100 yards or so, I can't remember exactly how much it was, but it was, that's the drift from the data. And you just accommodate for that amount of drift by just lining it up with the hole as Frank Legg did, or if you do the more detailed analysis that I did, it basically lines up perfectly with the radar. I mean, the radar has a lot of scatter to it. There's more observational error on each individual data point, but you basically have this line going right through all this other data. And the fact that that lines up also with the physical damage outside and the physical damage inside and the CRNX, the whole, everything, that diagram I showed you it's a straight line right through everything. So that's the correlation that I found to be very compelling. Kinetic energy. The plane had a ton of kinetic energy. I mean, it was in the gigajoules. I don't know exactly. As I recall, it was maybe like 20. I can't remember if it was that or.
2.5.
Huh?
2.5.
2.5 gigajoules, was that it? Okay. All right. So you have a bunch of energy in the incoming plane. Not all of that energy is going to get dumped out in the first thing it hits. Some of the energy gets used for this, and some of the energy gets used for that. If you look at the overall damage, it got distributed all over the place. The whole interior of the Pentagon was shredded in many ways by parts of that energy. And there's no particular formula for saying how much of that energy should be dissipated on each impact. So to say that you should have had a certain amount of energy dumped into column 18, there's no basis for that. It depends on the circumstances. If you get into a car crash, one person might be killed, and the person next to you might go scot-free, you know? You can't tell how the energy is going to get distributed in a messy situation like that. And the crash of a plane, similarly, there's going to be a certain amount of, the amount of energy partly depends on the resistance that you meet. So if you push against something, you're doing work against it, you deliver energy to that. But we know that it got spread around. It wasn't all in one place. The roll thing in the CIT, if you curve flight, there has to be a roll. You can't turn a plane without rolling it. And to basically take it from where Ed Pike's shop was, and the story that CIT was giving was that the plane flew over the nominal impact point, or whatever got called the X-impact point. They claim it wasn't impact. But it flew over that point, and then there was this explosion which made it like a magic show, so you assumed that it went in, but it actually went over. That's their storyline. That doesn't work. Okay, I'm getting a 1-minute thing. Deflagration versus detonation. Yeah, so the sound is part of it, but on the other hand, the deflagration is like a big fireball. It doesn't have the capacity to do the work, to transfer the energy, to break things that an actual explosion would do. So it's the shock wave produced by this supersonic expansion of gases that does the work, that makes the explosion so damaging, how you can blow apart a tank. You can't do that with a fireball. You blow that apart with the shock wave. So that's the issue there. And there's other stuff, but I'll just go on, all right?
Okay, thank you, David. Just to emphasize that try to keep questions as focused and precise as possible. We've got an audience out there who are being exposed to some challenging information. So if we try and keep it a fairly clear, succinct questions being asked, and then that should provide the space for, I think, some sort of education of the audience out there about your positions and arguments. So next up to raise a question about David's presentation is Craig McKeague.
Okay, thank you. It's tough in 5 minutes to get into specifics, so that's a challenge. Okay, a few things. First of all, David said in his presentation that Albert Hemphill, who was near the north side of the annex, facing the Pentagon, but on the north, that if the plane went over his right shoulder, that meant it was south of the gas station. This is false. It could easily go over the gas station, straight over the gas station, and still be over his right shoulder, which is almost at the left end of that building. So I think that's wrong. There are, David mentioned his 17-part thing, or with Wayne Costi. There are some very blatant falsehoods in that series of videos. And I don't know if they didn't really necessarily come up in his talk, but I hope they do in this discussion. One of which is, what I touched on was Lloyd England, saying that Lloyd England never identified the long base of the first pole. He did over and over and over again. And I think it's time that David removed that from his, David and Wayne removed that. Now, Truth Movement needs to resolve what hit the Pentagon, was a statement that David made. No, it doesn't, actually. We could spend the next 40 years arguing about, first of all, he asserts something hit the Pentagon. I don't think something hit the Pentagon. So it's not a question of what hit the Pentagon. And this idea that, well, we just have to keep wrestling over this for the next several decades, to me, it's just a recipe for, we'll never get anywhere with that. Now, you mentioned Frank Legg. Frank Legg's, one of my favorite Frank Legg's comments is that he said the reason there wasn't much wreckage at the Pentagon is because the wreckage was lost in the texture of the lawn. So what? That gives you an idea of what I think of him. Now, I don't know about the whole thing about the bias in the choice of CIT's photo. That one I don't understand. I think anybody can reasonably look at those photographs and see if they saw the plane to the left of the gas station. I think, we're not talking a scientific drawing here. I think what they did with that, nobody else did that. Nobody else went to Washington to do those interviews. Maybe David should have gone to Washington and done some interviews. But these guys did it, and they were very credible. Okay, I'm trying to race through here. Now, a lot of witnesses that David doesn't find convenient are referred to as being mistaken. Like Lloyd England was mistaken. Either he didn't say it, or if he did, he was mistaken. William Legacy was mistaken about where the poles were. He was mistaken about the path being on the north side of the gas station. And this didn't come up, but Legacy said that he saw the starboard side of the plane, and in David's research, he says that, well, he must have got that wrong. He must have been mistaken. So, there's only so many times people can be mistaken, and you start to sort of wonder that maybe it's the interpretation that's flawed and not the, how close am I getting here? 1.5, okay. Well, it's actually not going as fast as I thought it would. Let me just see here. Now, the Pentagon is the Wild West. See, I think this whole thing's been exaggerated, and I think this whole idea that the Pentagon is so contentious and so divisive, whenever I hear someone say the Pentagon is divisive, I stop them and I say it is not divisive. The Pentagon it may be contentious among with certain people, but it is not divisive. It is the way that people interpret the evidence that I think is causing the division. There was some references to architects and engineers talking about the Pentagon now, sort of suggestions that perhaps that's not appropriate. Well, I would sort of say that maybe Scientists for 9/11 Truth kind of focusing its efforts on the Chandler Group's Pentagon research perhaps isn't appropriate either. And he'd mentioned that, so that's why I bring it up here. You know, 63 witnesses saw the plane hit the building, was the statement that you saw up on the screen. 63 people may have said they saw that, but just because you say, I think the plane hit the building, or the plane hit the building, doesn't mean you actually saw that. It means you just said it. People can be mistaken, people can be lying. I think and as far as the arbitrary assumption that government evidence is all wrong, well, I don't think anybody makes an arbitrary assumption to that effect. Okay, I'm done, so I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Craig. David.
Okay. Hemphill. I didn't talk a lot about Albert Hemphill, but I do talk a lot about him. If you go to 911speakout.org, go to the Pentagon tab, and I have an analysis, a detailed analysis of 2 of the CIT interviews, one with Albert Hemphill, one with Sergeant Lagasse. Those are major efforts. I put hundreds of hours into this. Those interviews are not scientifically valid data gathering processes. They are exercises in trying to get a particular answer out of the person. They are I would consider them dishonest. So that's maybe considered I'm not trying to slur anybody, but they did not seem like valid, scientifically generated sources of information. Hemphill, from the very beginning, said the plane went over his right shoulder, went through the light poles. He saw one of the light poles flash. It described which floor of the Pentagon it went into over and over. They asked if it went beyond the VDOT tower, the Virginia Department of Transportation communication tower that was to the south. And he said, not that, he doesn't think it was that far. He was pointing to the south, beyond the Navy Annex. And that's where it went. So it's right there. In that entire hour, he made one statement, which was interpreted by Craig Ranke to indicate that maybe that went over the north side of the Citgo station. But then later he corrected himself. So no, he is a south path witness. CIT claims him as a north path witness. I think that is trying to squeeze the answer you want out of the people you're interviewing. I don't find the CIT effort to be a valid data gathering effort. The Lloyd England thing, same thing. Remember that long pole you saw there by the taxi in the pictures, I guess you showed, right? Okay, so that long pole by the taxi, that's where the taxi came to rest. The taxi had slowed down from 40 miles an hour to rest. And in that time, it had gone, I don't know, 150 feet, what was it we figured? 160 feet. So therefore, whatever hit the taxi to make him put on the brakes was 160 feet further up the road. That would have been a part from the second light pole. It's a short part that pierced the windshield, and by the time the taxi came to rest, it was by the first light pole. And they made a major effort to try to railroad him into identifying that big long pole as the one that went into his cab, which they immediately turned around. They immediately turned that around and pointed out to him that that was impossible. You couldn't have lifted it. The two people by themselves, a big heavy pole, it would have damaged the hood of your car. Those types of things. So they were trying to get an answer that they could use to discredit him. Why was the taxi so critical? The taxi is evidence of the plane flying through the light poles real time. If the plane knocked something off the light poles that went into the taxi, that means the plane was there at the time the taxi was there. And it's like, it does major damage to the idea that the plane was elsewhere or flying over the Pentagon or whatever. So no, the CIT group, it's just a nightmare of trying to pull all this stuff to try to make sense out of it. And I think I don't get much credibility. However, judge for yourself, go to 911speakout.org, go to the Pentagon tab, read the Sergeant Lagasse analysis. I have it there, text form, and also I did a video, and then also for Hemp Hill. Those are major pieces. If you want to understand what's going on in those interviews, that shows it very blatantly.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Barbara.
Okay, I'm using a different mic. Okay, so I just want to say my big takeaway from what's happened so far today. You see why we have to have the videos. The videos will solve it, especially the videos from the Sheraton Hotel. And the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry is going to specifically target the videos in an FOIA or FOIAs for the Sheraton Hotel videos. Now, in responding to this morning, which has quite frankly saddened me, we're in the same position that we've always been in, disagreeing over the interpretation of the same data. That's why we have to have the videos. But moving on from that, I asked myself as I was listening to the other speakers and knowing what I know myself, I asked myself, what would be the one solid fact that I believe is irrefutable? And my answer to that is that very famous photograph where you have all of those columns still there. Some of them are around the center official story alleged impact point, which David Chandler and his colleagues accept. The column 14, which is supposed to be the bullseye of the nose of the plane, of the official story of Flight 77, it is still there. And the floor right under it, at least on the right side, is still there. There is only approximately 50 at a maximum 60 feet in the first floor. The columns to the right and left of that, especially to the right, they're damaged. Not all of them. I think 18, Xander said, was almost, not bowed over or damaged very much at all. My stake in the ground is that it is impossible for a 757 multi-ton going at 530 at least miles per hour. Some analyses say 550, but say 530. It's impossible for all of that to have hit, and column 14, supposed to be the bullseye of the nose, is still there. It didn't happen. So that's my stake in the ground. Maybe other people will have different stakes in the ground, that's their absolute certainty. You have to have some place that you're certain about in order to go from that. Now, I would like to say, I can't remember who it was who stated, I believe it was, it might have been Mr. Chandler, who in his presentation had a video and then commented, that's right, it was, and he commented that Mr. Lagasse, one of the two Citgo gas station Pentagon policemen, that he said, well, there was no explosion. Hemp Hill is a critical witness that even Mr. Chandler uses. And Hemp Hill is absolutely explicit that when he saw the fireball, whatever caused that there was such a massive explosion and pressure wave came back, that he referred to it as like a 2,000-pound bomb going off.
Not through that. So
and that he knew
if
about
you have
these bombs.
if you
So
have
it's
the
just not credible to me.
receiver, You can plug the receiver
that-
in on the other side of your Mac and
that
bring that in.
anyone would suggest that that an explosion is not possible, other than an impact. My bottom line is, I don't think we're going to come to agreement. I thought we'd get closer to it today, but I'm committed to getting the videos. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. David.
You hear me better now?
Yes.
Should be a
one of
USB-C
my concerns
spot on the
about this
back to
whole
plug a
debate,
cable into,
this whole-
USB-C cable. Or if you put in,
Pentagon scene in terms of the movement.
I don't know which, I can't
is
remember
that
which
there
version
are
you have. Do you have one or
groups
two?
that have their heels dug in hard, and there's no movement.
USB-C slot
I've
there, plug
changed
that
my
in
position
to a cable and then plug the
over
other into
time.
the
I've evolved.
There should be a
as I've
cable in
researched
the
things and
case.
have new insights. Wayne has changed his position. He caught into this because he was actually researching to prove that no plane could have hit the Pentagon, and he got persuaded otherwise. So people who can change their position in the light of new information, that's the normal situation when there's new information being brought around. But when you have individuals or groups that are completely dug in, no change whatsoever, that really I find concerning. When Barbara Honegger put out her smoke curtain video, which is out here, I guess you can get a copy. But Scientists for 9/11 Truth, John Wyndham led the effort. We basically did a critique of it. It's 90 pages of critique of the statements that she made in that video. Those critiqued, it's like all of those, many of the assertions she's made today in her, I guess it's supposed to be my presentation, but anyway, many of those same assertions are there today as well, with no reference to them ever having been looked at. So, and the column, I want to talk about column 14, then I'll quit here. Column 14 on the second floor looks from certain perspectives like it's an intact column, but there's a lot of smoke and other things. You can find variant photographs of that column, and what you find is it's actually leaning into the Pentagon, hanging from by rebar, swung into the Pentagon. So if you're seeing it from this angle, it looks straight,
And then
but it's
after you
actually
plug
only
that in
half
and
the
turn it
column.
on,
It's
if you
into
had
the
that mic
Pentagon in the
connected to
direction of
your
motion of the plane.
Osmo, you might have to use
And
the other
it's
one.
not, and the
because it
floor under
probably
it
should be
is literally
connected and
missing.
not connected to the
You can see where
receiver.
all the white foam spray is outlining what's the surface.
We can try
and
it
it's
first,
just
though.
missing under the column 14. It's not there. There's no floor there. This was an area where it was carved out by the impact. So the whole argument about column 14, we have brought this up to Barbara and others. It's out there for a couple
the
of
audio
years now. I
sounds
don't know when
okay
we
with
first
the,
brought that out, but
Mac Air mic.
Barbara brings it up like it's brand new stuff, I guess. But it has been critiqued, it has been debunked. And
And do
no,
you want
column
to see
14
the
is
screen? You
not
want
a
it like
problem
this, or do you want it
for
like
an
this?
impacting plane. And I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you, David. I just want to emphasize yet again, just to try to make sure that we stay focused on specific issues in presentations and so on. And, you know, we will have space in the open discussion to go into more general issues and debates and so on. So the more focused, the better. The more we can go through an exercise of actually identifying key issues which the audience can see and understand. And, you know, this raises ultimately a set of issues which we can then, going forward, start to examine systematically. So try to stay focused. Now, David has obviously just been responding, but it's now David's opportunity to respond or to raise 5 minutes issues about the presentations we've had so far today. David, you can, if you wish, share it with Wayne, but I'm assuming that you'll lead the response. So first of all, David, would you like to comment upon Xander's paper?
Okay. Xander put his stuff out just within recent weeks. I haven't had a chance to look through it in detail, but it's the kind of thing that looks like a whole bunch of math that I don't see how it hangs together, it's not persuasive to me. I don't know if you were persuaded by it. It's a lot of numbers, but It doesn't, just because there's a lot of stuff there, it doesn't mean it makes sense. So that's my first take on it. I did look at some of the aspects that he talked about, as far as taking the data from that little tiny fuzzy plane in the corner of the frame and trying to make a quantitative measurement of how that translates to whether it could be the size of a 757 or not, is not persuasive. And it's a single data point, and it's a high unreliability to it. So when you take it and you try to step it across, stepping it across is not a valid procedure, because the picture is not a linear thing. If you noticed when he had his corrected video and he showed the car drive across, there was the police car that drove across through there. It's like it's coming at you and going around like this. I mean, there's still a remnant distortion there. And to try to claim that you have quantitative information about how to scale the image to scale from the image to reality, that takes something called a transfer function for that lens. And I don't believe you have the transfer function for that lens. Isn't that correct? I thought I saw something where you didn't even know the focal length of the lens, but I'm not sure if that's been remedied. But I mean, it's like, it seems to be, it's reaching to try to pull more information out of that one data point than is valid. And for that to be used to counteract hard data, like where the wings actually touch things, you can see the scars. I don't think that measurements from one image on the corner of a photograph is valid for discrediting the hard evidence. That's the main upshot.
Okay, thank you, David. Xander, would you like to take the podium and respond?
Certainly. Okay, well, on topic to that, looking at that angular field of view, you're correct. It is imperfect. It is a closer approximation than we have ever been before. And I would encourage folks to perhaps use current AI or other things to fully deconstruct that distortion, where we can make those more accurate angular field of view measurements. And I do believe that we will come to the same conclusion as I presented this morning. There is a margin of error in my measurements, and in previous presentations I have addressed that, talked about it, and it is within the realm of the conclusion given. I would like to also say that with respect to the earlier comment about damage to artifacts there at the scene, we can make accurate measurements based on energy analysis. We know that the Boeing 757 wing spar is composed of 7075 T6 aluminum. We know what that aluminum's yield strength is. We know where it is in the wing. We know the width of the cord. We have very precise pieces of information that we can use to discern the effects of that impact. We know the width of column 18. We know it's a 21-inch box column. These are easy calculations that can be done, and perhaps should be, by engineers and other scientists, researchers with access to FEA technology. We could use LS-DYNA, we could use ANSYS, we could use these modern tools to really come to conclusion. And I believe when you dissect the math presented in some of my recent writing, you're going to find that it's accurate, it's on point, it's verifiable, we can validate it. And no, math is not for everybody, I get that, but I was persuaded by those numbers, so much so that at great risk to myself and perhaps, who knows, my career and other things, I put it down, put it on paper, published it, and I'm here to defend it.
Thank you, Xander. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. It's you again. Or you can share it with Wayne, but and I'm just trying to remind myself. It was Craig. Your response to Craig's presentation, 5 minutes, and then Craig will have 5 minutes to respond.
I'll let Wayne. I'll allow Wayne to take my place with us. He has a question for Craig, I believe. Sure. Okay, come on, Wayne.
Wayne Costi. I've been doing research on the Pentagon for quite a long time, Twin Towers, other stuff. One of the things I wanted to mention about the energy and Xander's analysis was that First of all, one of the things that the finite element analysis that you were talking about needing to do has been done by Purdue. And what they've done is they've taken the energy and they've done the mass balance, and they've done this, and it's up.
Sorry to interrupt, but you're responding to Craig's presentation.
Pardon?
To Craig's presentation.
Oh, I was. Okay, so if I'm supposed to respond to Craig's presentation, I wasn't intending. So, Craig, once again, you've raised up the Lloyd England paradigm, and I want to say that I don't know why you stick to this story. Now, the reason is we've had this discussion even online, and CIT all throughout its presentations about Lloyd England has insisted through lots of innuendo that the large pole is what hit the cab. That's what Lloyd says. That's what they say is impossible. And every time it should have been a point where you say, well, Lloyd, so show us with your hands where it was. Well, how big was it? It's all replaced by them putting words in Lloyd's mouth. Now, there is one exception, and I'll get to that in a second. If you take a look at the light poles, the lamps that were over the highway, the lower lamp support arm is 11.5 feet long, and that is right in the place for the left wing tip to have grazed the pole and impacted the pole, knocked it into where Lloyd's taxi would have been traveling. So what it should be is a 11.5-foot pole sticking out. And if you take a Lincoln Town Car and you stick one end at the rear seat where the hole is that you showed, it goes out through the seats into the dashboard where it's dented. And Lloyd England actually talks about this, and the CIT left one thing in which ruins their entire credibility. If you go to Eye of the Storm at 48 minutes and 7 seconds, you will see Lloyd England in conversations with Craig Ranke going and saying, well, there's a dent here. So, and Lloyd walks across the front of the cab, and what he does is he shows it went from here, right where the front of an 11.5-foot pole would have been, right from here all the way back. CIT left it in. Every other place it should have been in has been on the cutting room floor. CIT, that is typical from what I've gathered and what David has assessed of the CIT analysis. There's probably other things I could talk about, but I wasn't prepared to talk about Craig's. That's the one thing that's really the one thing that I had. And let me take a look here. I think that's going to be it.
You've still got a couple more minutes. I mean, if David wants to come in with a further question for Craig, he's very welcome to.
Well, I just want to emphasize the Lloyd England issue is an issue raised by CIT because Lloyd England destroys their theory. And they have to discredit him any way they can to keep their theory intact. That's my assertion. And if you look at their behavior, they try to vilify him. They try to claim he's one of the co-conspirators, and they misinterpret things he says. They put words in his mouth. It's a disaster of an interview. If you just look at it with an open mind, it is like, what are they doing to this guy? That's the impression I get. So I think it's basically a dishonorable kind of a process they're going through. They're not doing data gathering to figure out what Lloyd England does or doesn't know. They're trying to find a way to discredit his testimony.
Craig, can I just emphasize, again, as we did set out in the moderation rules, I want us to avoid as much as possible suggestions of bad intent on the part of anybody. So we try and keep it, as it were, sort of as neutral and as objective as possible. We can talk about bad data and analysis and so on, but not suggesting ill intent or intent to deceive. I think it's important that we stay away from that territory here today.
We didn't. He just did.
And that's why I've just.
I want to respond to it.
Yeah, and that's why I've just flagged it up.
Well,
And
you can't
so,
flag it up when I'm about to speak.
yep.
That's
yep.
not fair.
But I want you to try and respond to the points that they raised.
Well, I'm going to respond to the whole thing that they raised. I think what we've seen here today with this, I mean, this is fraudulent, what is being done. We can't obviously get into the whole Lloyd England thing in 5 minutes. Wayne and I did a long debate about it, and I think all of the emptiness of his arguments was very well revealed there. What is very clear, if you watch that, is that Lloyd England claims that he was in a different location. He claims to have been much farther north, close to the Pentagon, and that is what that entire discussion is about. It's not about which pole it was. They're not trying to put words in his mouth to say, this is the pole, right? The whole conversation is about him saying he's in a different location. And incidentally, Lloyd England says, no, I wasn't anywhere near the bridge. And off camera, they had a recording of him, the audio going, and Lloyd talks about the guy that took the pictures of his cab was up on the bridge. So off camera, it's up on the bridge, and on camera, it's like, no, I wasn't there. So they weren't putting any words. And honestly, for these two to say at this point that Lloyd never said that it was that long pole, he said it over and over and over again. And for some reason, they don't seem to consider the possibility that maybe he wasn't being truthful. They just think, well, it couldn't possibly be this long pole, so it must have been a different pole. Like, to me, that doesn't sound scientific to me. I mean, scientific would be, evaluating what he says and seeing whether what he says can be possible or not. He very clearly is talking about a 30 to 40 foot long pole going through his car. Wayne said that I forget how he put it exactly, but it made a path right through the seat to the back seat. It didn't. It bent the front seat. The front seat was bent back like this, and the hole was in behind the seat. So there's no way any pole, a pole of any length, could go through that windshield, hit that seat, not even scratch it, and then get to the back seat and make a little hole. It's ridiculous. If anything is dishonest, and I didn't bring this word up first, it's their mischaracterization of the Lloyd England evidence and also the other CIT evidence. And I would love it if the CIT guys were here. I wish they were here to defend themselves. And I would say, if there's any time left, I would say that the reason that this movement appears to be deadlocked, this is an illusion. This supposed deadlock is an illusion. Okay, there is widespread understanding in the movement that a plane did not hit the Pentagon, and there's loads of evidence for that. The only reason we think we're in this kind of endless deadlock is because of the David Chandler, Wayne Kosky group. They're the only ones that keep pushing this. Basically, what they spend almost 100% of their time when they talk about the Pentagon is talking about things that they think that the government got right in the official story. Okay? There's almost nothing that they don't agree with. But if there is an area that they might not agree with, like David seems to think there was remote control, Wayne now does not think that, so he's even closer to the official story. But the one thing that they don't agree with the official story on is the thing he never talks about. So isn't that odd? We are supposed to be looking at the evidence. We're supposed to be looking to see if the official story holds up or not endlessly propping up the official story. If there's ever a question, if there's ever an issue with the official story, something that the government can't explain, David and Wayne are always right there to sort of patch up the hole for them and try to find a way that maybe it's true. Maybe what the government said is true. I know they don't say everything is true, but they say just about everything. So this whole maligning of CIT, to me, is outrageous. And you know what? I've got to say one thing. I challenge. Am I almost done? Almost done?
1 minute.
Okay. Okay. So I want to challenge the leaders of this movement. There has been too much sort of passively sitting back over all these years and saying, well, there's both sides and they both have their opinions and we're dead. We just don't know. It's time for the leaders of this movement, and some of them are in this room today, to start challenging these claims and making them account for them, because it is this group that has caused this issue to become so supposedly divisive and contentious. It's not any more divisive than the World Trade Center. There are people in the World Trade Center that think there were directed energy weapons, but it doesn't grind the whole movement to a halt. And the Pentagon shouldn't either. So I think I'm done. Am I done? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll reiterate. Now, I said at the start that we don't want to have applause during the discussion phase, so can we avoid applauding, please? Let's keep it calm and rational. Let's avoid indications and suggestions of ill intent and deception. For the wider audience out there, that's not going to help them at all to understand the kind of detailed, specific technical issues which you have been raising in your presentation. So I'll just reiterate that point. Now, David, a chance to respond to Barbara's presentation.
I haven't taken detailed notes on everybody's presentations here, but the main thing I think I said, I just want to reiterate, and I'd like to get maybe a response, which is of all of the critiques that have been made about specific assertions, like for instance, you have the plane crossing the lawn and you see the Pentagon in the background and you say, obviously it wouldn't fit into the first floor. I went through a detailed, completely rigorous analysis of that and how that was, it's sort of like dangling a little fish in front of the camera when you're standing back here and it makes it look big. That's what's going on in that picture. So yeah, it was to scale, but she's comparing an up-close plane with a distant part of the Pentagon and saying, see, it wouldn't fit into the first floor. Those kinds of things that are peppered through, that are peppered throughout a lot of her work, that really it bothers me that once it's been pointed out, she never addresses it and corrects it. Or if she thinks it's not right, she could come back. But there's no ongoing dialogue to actually improve the level of factual content. So that's the biggest problem I have with the majority of what I see in Barbara's work. So I'll just let her respond to that.
Oh. All right. The Chandler Costi Wyndham Group. Mr. Chandler has referred to this so-called critique of my Behind the Smoke Curtain. And by the way, there's a complimentary copy of my DVD, Behind the Smoke Curtain, on the table out there by Richard Gage's table with Yale. I want everyone to take it. It's free, it's complimentary. And I'd like you to read all of the reactions of 9/11 truth leaders, except for Mr. Chandler. And I think that you will see there's a very different reaction, an extremely different reaction to my work. Now, I want to give you an example. It was just claimed that I have not responded. That is not true. For instance, in my previous remarks right here today, a little bit ago, I said I put my stake in the ground on column 14. The official story claims that the nose of this massive plane hitting at 530 miles an hour. And you can still see the column. What Mr. Chandler said is a difference that makes no difference. It's there. It might be hanging a little bit in, as he said. And I've had the discussion with Mr. Chandler and Mr. Costi, one-on-one, in Chandler's house in Denver, after the conference, in which Mr. Costi said to me, well, Barbara, you know, that column 14, it's not completely there. You know, it's hanging up here and it's over there. It's still there. And he also said, and then I also said, well, what about the column that's immediately in? Because there are columns like every 10 feet or so. It's there. You cannot have a massive 757 hit the building where Mr. Costi and Chandler and the government say and have the damage or the lack of damage at column 14, at column 18, in any of that, it won't happen. And I want to talk about Hemphill, not because Hemphill is the most important witness. He is a witness, and he's an important one. He was important enough for Mr. Chandler to spend, hundreds of hours or whatever he said, analyzing. I have read Mr. Chandler's analysis, okay? And the thing about Mr. Hemphill is not only did he say it was like the reaction, the effect back to all of that distance, back to the naval annex was like a 2,000-pound bomb going on. Didn't mention it. But the other thing, I don't understand how the South Path people, whoever they are, can use Mr. Hemphill as an example for their side. Because Mr. Hemphill is very clear, and Mr. Chandler just said so, just reminded us, that he says that he saw the plane go right over the Citgo gas station. You can't go over the Citgo gas station and be on the South Path. It is impossible. Okay, so there seems to be, I think there's a lot going on here of having an idea of what happened and having blind spots about the evidence that doesn't fit. And I think this is not a personal critique. I think it's human nature to do this. But the other thing that I wanted to mention, besides, please get behind the smoke curtain for yourself and read what everyone has said about it. The leaders of the movement, 30 of them, they're not on the stage right now. All right. Now, when you do that, I think that it's also important to know that all of this discussion, all of this disagreement, all of this different interpretations will go away when we get the hard evidence, the really hard evidence. Okay? I don't think anyone can believe that that plane hit that column, and it's not perfect, but it's still there, and it might be bent in a little bit. So I think, I don't like to use the word dishonest, but it is an incredibly biased reaction to a very logical, common sense realization that it couldn't have happened there.
Okay, thank you, Barbara.
Okay, thank you very much, Barbara. Now, we've had a good indication here of both of the detail and the specificity of some of the arguments that have been over the Pentagon, and also a very good indication at points of the kind of very deeply held beliefs and passionately held beliefs that people have. Now, we do have a question from the audience, which we're going to introduce. We've got about 15 minutes before the break. Richard Ellifritz is going to put the question, and we'll give an opportunity for the panelists to respond to the question from the audience.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. This has been a thought-provoking discussion from all of our members up here, and we have a thought-provoking and very thoughtful question from the audience. So this one is thoughtful. So all physical evidence was supplied by the U.S. government, or if all physical evidence was supplied by the U.S. government, if that evidence was removed from you and your theory, what would be left? So what would be left of your theory if you removed all government evidence from your analysis? So in your analysis, based on your presentations, if you removed evidence that was supplied by the government, what would be left of your theory?
Who do you want to?
So we have a volunteer. So I guess we could go down the line. That would.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think everybody has a thought.
So to answer the question, what would the evidence be if all the government data, supplied data was missing or taken away, I would say there's a huge amount. So what would you find out? First of all, you'd find out that there were enormous numbers of photographers, independent people taking photographs, taking images, videos live on TV. Barbara's explosion that she highlights, oh, this is where the wall came down. In fact, Dylan Avery talks about it in one of the channels. He's he's reviewing videos from CBS live at 9:44 in, I forget the seconds, seeing it explode. It's on the front lawn. It's the propane tank of the tractor trailer or the forklift that had tipped over and had caught fire. It is clearly not in the Pentagon. It's on the lawn. So that's one thing. The pictures of the generator trailer taken by many people clearly show the trace on the front, on the top of the roof. That is not a government-supplied piece of evidence, and that establishes the flap track fairing, the thing that looks like a canoe under the wing. It establishes exactly where it was. Then you can say the pictures that Daryl Donlan took that show, and he's not a government agent or government-supplied, and you can see in many different pictures the retaining wall is gone, and it is exactly 63.1 feet from flap track fairing to that area. And right there is where the pictures of the spools were from the satellites. I'm assuming the satellite photo is still a legitimate thing to have used. But you can see that there was a spool that I call number 7, and it would have been hit by the left side. So that's there. You can see the pictures and the photos of column 9AA. Van Zanders showed the pictures really well. He just doesn't know why it's that way, but it's bent at 2/3 of the way up. You can see that the column, the beam between columns 11 and 13 is missing. And because the plane hit the retaining wall, the engine hit the retaining wall, the wing hit column 9A about 4 feet below the beam. The only thing that can be above it is the tail. Now, how did the tail get over there instead of going straight through like your example, your energy example, with all those decimal points of precision, saying that it went straight? No, it hit the right engine hit the trailer, reduced energy on that side. They created a yaw rotation. Had the generator trailer been an immense brick, the plane would have turned around it, but it wasn't so big. It was deformed. It was movable. So the plane has time to rotate some small amount. And
let's keep it focused on the question at hand, though.
The track was going to column 13. The yaw rotation turned the nose to hit column 14, and the tail hit between there. So that's all not government supplied data, and it proves by looking at the data, by looking at the engineering dynamics, that a large plane impact not only hit it, but establishes the dimensions of a 757 exactly.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who has a answer? So the question at hand for the audience was, if you removed government supplied data, what would be left of your theory?
Everything, I think. I mean, obviously you have to look at everything, and you have to look at what the government is providing. We had to look at the video. I mean, I think Xander did a great job of dealing with that. I think if you look at the smoke cloud in that video, the sort of wavy tail on it, which looks to me very fake. Now, that's not a professional opinion. That's just my opinion. It looks very fake to me. So I think there has to be more than evidence that only the government has control over, including DNA, radar, flight data recorder. When you've got other evidence that directly contradicts it, such as with the lack of sufficient damage, the hole not being large enough, the absence of any large debris outside at all, I don't think that my position would suffer the least bit if you had no government evidence at all. I mean, the photographs are obviously critical, and some of those were supplied by people that were in the military, and some just by passersby, I suppose. But as far as I'm concerned, if you base all your opinion on just that government-controlled evidence, and then you try to look for things in the damage to try to match up to that, I think you're going at it backwards. I think you've got to start with the evidence. What does the evidence show? And so that's my answer to that.
Dear. My answer would be, without all the government evidence, my position that the photographs show clearly that there was a plane destruction in the area of the helipad. There is a lot of wreckage. The reason that there doesn't appear to be as much as you would expect is because of the plane being either exploded or hitting, as many witnesses saw, and then exploding from an impact on the ground. In other words, I'd also like to say that I don't think the right question should have been, did a plane hit the Pentagon, or did Flight 77 hit the Pentagon? I think the important question was, was there a plane crash there, and was it Flight 77? I made the case that it isn't and can't be Flight 77 from different lines of evidence. I'd also like to say that I was only able to get to maybe a third of my slides. And so anyone who would like my slides, please give me your email address. And also, please take one of my behind the smoke curtains, read what the leaders of the truth movement say, just even 3 of them, and you will see how totally different they are from Mr. Chandler and Mr. Costa. It's a rebuttal. And I would like to say, because I think we need to defend ourselves, I would like to say that the Wyndham so-called rebuttal of my behind the smoke curtain, it doesn't matter how many pages it is, the bottom line of that alleged rebuttal was that he falsely claimed that all my entire analysis is that explosives, pre-planted explosives, did the whole thing. You saw my presentation, you know that isn't true.
To the audience's question, my conclusions would remain the same. In fact, that is what I did. I removed all government data and even implication that it was the Pentagon or American Airlines 77, and instead ran analysis of a 757 impacting a building with 21-inch box columns spaced 10 feet apart, a 5-story building, a building with brick reinforcement, limestone cladding, Kevlar behind it. So I never analyzed 77 impacting the Pentagon. I came to these conclusions by energetic analysis of an equivalent scenario. My conclusions remain the same. No large aircraft impacted that building that morning.
Okay, does anybody else have anything further to say on the audience member question? No, okay. Did you want to put your question in? Or?
Sure.
Sure.
And again, thank you for everybody's presentations. I think the general public and the wider audience listening and into the future will be more educated for having listened and thoroughly listening. I hope that we can take a little bit of time to remind people who are watching now or in the future about the significance of the Pentagon events on September 11th, 2001, of the significance either for 9/11 and the justification for the war on terror, and or the significance of the Pentagon events for the 9/11 truth movement. So however you want to approach that question, as a reminder to the audience of why it is that we all took our time and energy to be here today to discuss this very important issue.
So as you have now heard, my opinion is that a large plane impacted the Pentagon and it was a 757. So what is so significant about this? First of all, in my opinion, the issue of what happened is completely resolved by looking at the physical data. And the thing that is the most important, and I'm really glad you asked this question, the thing that is the most important about this is how did a plane get through all the supposed air defenses, everything that allowed it to actually impact at the Pentagon? Who was clearing the way for it? That is, to me, the most important question that this audience, this movement should be trying to address. How did this happen? There seems to be a nothing burger about the plane actually hit, just as the official story said, as Craig and others people say that I'm foolish to recount, but that's what happened. But the question is, how did it happen? Who let it go? Barbara mentioned that in her presentation the descent of from the transponder as it was approaching the turn. In fact, what happened is the primary radar returns were missing. FAA lost a primary return. That's when the radar goes bleep and you get a response back. A passive thing. How do you enter? You can't. They thought the plane crashed because the primary radar was gone. So that brings us to the question of who is P-TECH. P-TECH is supposed to have been a company that had fingers in all sorts of high-tech stuff that was related to the war games that Barbara has talked about so much in her books, that they could put spots on the FAA radar and take it away. And so to assert that there's something missing in one of the things is actually more evidence of the war game type stuff going on than it is of anything else. The flight data recorder, in my opinion, for reasons that I can't get into in a short period of time, is 100% accurate. The FAA technicians, the NTSB technicians did not have the information available to them to put in the last 4 seconds about the impact, which is obvious and which I talk about.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have a response to the significance of the Pentagon event for the official story and or the 9/11 truth movement?
It was on the last slide of my slideshow. And for me, the implication is that if no aircraft impacted that building, 125 men and women of the United States died needlessly, and we don't have adequate resolution for their death. That's why.
In Behind the Smoke Curtain, which goes on for 2.5 hours, free DVD in the lobby, I marshal the evidence that the plane that left the airport, that left Ellis Airport, just lots of evidence that plane, something happened to those passengers. They did die, but there is no proof that their remains that were analyzed were found inside the Pentagon. And also, in Behind the Smoke Curtain, and as well as on the screen here, you saw what the government claims in the Pentagon Building Performance Report, that the vast majority of the alleged passenger bodies were actually, it says, outside the alleged exit hole. By the way, in Smoke Curtain, you will find, and in the rest of the slides in my presentation, please give me your email and I will send them all to you. You will learn that one of the world's foremost shape charge experts says that so-called exit hole of a plane was made by putting a shape charge on the wall. It's just a fact. Okay, so there was no plane that got that far. There was no plane parts that got that far, and there were all those little bubbles that they want you to believe in the Pentagon Building Performance Report that Mr. Chandler and Mr. Cossey are assuming are correct. I am. They're assuming that those represent real bodies or real parts of bodies. There are none there. This data that the government gives us is not real.
Yeah, I just want to say that the Pentagon, first of all, the Pentagon is very important to the world because it is the way that subsequent wars were justified, or one of the strongest ways, because obviously you can't attack the U.S. military headquarters without expecting a military response. So there, that justified that. and the war on terror is what followed. I think for the truth movement, well, okay, before I get to that, another thing that's very important is that it gives away the whole thing. It's not the only thing. There's, I've always felt like that for me, when I was educating myself about 9/11, it was the cumulative evidence that convinced me. It was like I looked at the towers, and then wait a minute, I looked at the Pentagon, and then Shanksville, and it was like a mountain of evidence. I didn't just take one thing. So the Pentagon gives a lot away about this deception. And how is it important for the truth movement? Well, the truth movement's got to deal with it in the sense that we can't just be endlessly doing, as much as I really enjoyed this whole exercise, and I'm glad we're doing it, I don't want to be doing it 10 years from now or 20 years from now. Well, I'd like to be alive 20 years from now, but not necessarily debating this topic. So I think it's time for a lot of people in the movement to say, I better kind of take a stand on this. I better not just sit back and say, well, we just don't know. There's too much. I mean, and when it comes to the videos, I'd certainly applaud asking for the videos, but I don't think I want to sit around waiting for the government to hand us the proof that they did, that they did this event. We can demand it and we can push them for it, and I think we should. But we can't sit back and say, well, until we get those videos, we can't really do very much. I think it's very clear what happened there and why it's important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Craig.